Hi, everybody. I can see you joining the webinar right now. Everyone's streaming online. So this is the International Water Resources Association webinar on policy to support water reuse technologies. We're really happy to have you here today, and we have a great panel assembled for you. And we're going to get started in just 1 or 2 minutes. So that gives you enough time to get a last cup of coffee if you're in Canada, like Mary Trudeau. Or a glass of water or something, whatever's appropriate for where you're at. We're happy to have you here today, and thank you for joining us. Yeah. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the IWRA webinar. This is the webinar on policy to support water reuse technology. We're really happy to have you here today, and we're going to get started in just 1 or 2 minutes. Give everyone one last chance to get your coffee, get your papers and pencils, and all that put together. We appreciate everyone joining, and we're going to have a really good event with some really great and quite accomplished panelists. So thank you for joining us today, and we'll get started. Just trying to get our one last panelist connected here, if we can get her. Dr. Romano, can you hear us now?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, this is step 1 to having you with us today.
Thank you very much. I'm happy it worked out. Although I don't think you can see me. Can you?
No, we can't see you, but you know, with academics and everything, you know, a lot of it's about the ideas, you know. That's what's important today.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, we might have a little trouble getting you. I'm not giving up. I'm not giving up hope, but we might have to delay this idea until we have later. We'll do our best here, and we'll make this move as smoothly as possible for everybody. What I would like to do, though, is get the webinar started, because there's a lot of people waiting, and I know that they're interested in hearing about water reuse. So, everybody, I'd like to welcome you to the International Water Resources Association webinar on policy to support water reuse technology. We have a moderator today, Mary Trudeau, from Project Officer from IWRA, who's woken up very early to join us here. We appreciate that. We have a panel today that includes Soy Chu, Program Specialist at UNESCO IWSSM Korea, Greg Leslie, Director at the UNSW Global Water Institute in Australia, Shia Razkankar, Assistant Manager at Exium Water Solutions, and Ornino Remino, Policy Analyst at the OECD in France here. Just to remind everybody, this is a webinar hosted by the International Water Resources Association. The International Water Resources Association is a network of researchers and practitioners who work on a multidisciplinary range of water resource issues. We are a nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization. The IWRA provides a global knowledge-based forum for bridging disciplines and geographies by connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. So we're really happy to have you here today. So thank you for tuning in. We have a really great panel. As you can see, there's kind of practitioners and we have academics. And I think having a nice combination of the two sort of helps balance out and provides a really good insight into the problems that we're discussing. Today, as you might know, the theme of the webinar is the policy to support water use technologies and different approaches. So we're looking at how decision makers are developing and expanding their policy tools to support water reuse. And these include both technological options, the physical side, but also stakeholder engagement to engage the social side. So this webinar here today is going to help us kind of understand better what are some of these really effective policies that can support water reuse. So just let me briefly explain the format of today's webinar, which will be a little bit different than maybe you've been used to. So at the beginning, we're going to have Mary give a quick, she'll quickly to take over the moderating responsibilities, and then she'll be working us through each of our panelists, moderating that. And after each panelist has given a short presentation, we'll have a short period of time for questions for each panelist. And then at the end of the whole event, we will also have time for your questions at the end as well. So if you have any questions, you should see there on the right side of your box, the GoToWebinar control panel should show questions. If you type those in, me and Mary will be able to see them and send them to the appropriate and correct presenter. So if you have any questions at all, just type them in as soon as you have the idea, and then we'll be able to route them along accordingly. So we appreciate that, and just remind everybody that we will of course have the presentations as well as a recording of this webinar posted on our website, www.iwra.org, shortly thereafter the event has concluded. So give us a few days, but we'll get it there. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn the floor over to Mary Trudeau.
Thank you, Scott, and welcome everyone. Yeah, so my name is Mary Trudeau, and I've been assisting the IWRA with the Global Water Security Issues publications. And yeah, it's my pleasure today to be introducing the panel and also moderating the questions in between the presentations. And then we will also have time at the end, after all of the presentations, to have a bit of a discussion. So please type in your questions, and we'll have time for a few of them after each presentation, but then we'll try to get to as many as possible near the end. So to introduce the Global Water Security Issues publication, I'd like to introduce Dr. Seo Choi, who is a civil and environmental engineer. He's also a program specialist in the Division of Research and Development with UNESCO's International Centre for Water Security and Sustainable Management, IWSSM. It's a center in Korea. Dr. Choi has been the i-WSSM point of contact for the Global Water Security Issues Research Initiative. So over to you, Choi.
All right, I'm just trying to work out to share my screen, and there we go. All right, thank you for the great introduction, Mary, and my name is Seo Choi, as Mary introduced, and good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And coronavirus is striking us harmfully again, but I hope you and your family are staying well and healthy within this crisis. And today, IWRA is hosting a webinar focused on policy to support waste water reuse technologies. And water reuse is one of the key strategies for to improve water security. And before the three excellent speakers give us talks about water reuse and their experiences deeply, I'd like to introduce UNESCO i-WSSM briefly and GWSI as well. So to begin with, UNESCO IWSSM is an International Center for Water Security and Sustainable Management, and it's a Category 2 center under the auspices of UNESCO. And it's located in Daejeon and South Korea. And the center was founded by recognizing the importance of water security within the 8th phase of IHP, the Intergovernmental Hydrological Program, to achieve the 6th goal of SDG, which is ensure access to water and sanitation for all. And now move on to GWSI series. And GWSI series is a global water security issues, and it's a publication that co-published by UNESCO and UNESCO IWSSM since 2019 with acknowledgements of IWRA. It's an open access publication that listed in the UNESCO Digital Library, and it aims to share the current issues and to contribute towards achieving water security in the long term. To talk about the brief procedure briefly, we do the submitted proposals are blind reviewed by selection committee, and we strictly follow the African priority and gender equality that UNESCO highlights. Then the selected papers are peer reviewed before publishing. So the first series was launched in the last year, May, and with the title of Water Security and the Sustainable Development Goals. In total, 18 authors with the 44% of female authors were involved with the 11 different institutions. And as you can see on the screen, the authors from various organizations from academia and international organizations, NGOs, and government agencies. And the second series, the series that we are currently working on is titled with water reuse within a circular economy context. In total, 34 authors with 42% of women authors are involved, and 18 from 18 different institutions. And currently the series is in the very last procedure, and it will be published soon. So please stay focused for upcoming updates. And the next series is titled with the role of sound groundwater resources management and governance to achieve water security. And currently, the authors are working on their manuscripts. In total, 35 authors from 24 different institutions, with 23% of African authors are involved. And that was the quick review of UNESCO IWSSM and GWSI series, and that is all I have prepared today. And once again, I'd like to thank again for giving me to IWRA to giving me this great opportunity to promote our center and GWSI series. And hope you enjoy the rest of presentations. And thank you very much for the kind patience. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sue. And we, IWRA, UNESCO IWSSM will be distributing the links to the publication widely once it is available. So if you are an IWRA member, keep your eyes out for that. And otherwise, the first publication is available on the UNESCO website as open source. So. And they not only are very informative, but they're beautifully produced reports. Okay, so we'll move on to our first presenter. So the three presenters we have today are each authors of one of the chapters in the pending publication. So Dr. Greg Leslie is the director of the Global Water Institute at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, and he's also a professor in the School of Chemical Engineering. Dr. Leslie has worked in both the public and private sectors on the design and optimization of advanced water treatment plants for industrial and municipal water recycling. He's an author of a chapter in the upcoming Global Water Series Issues publication titled Industrial Water Recycling in Australia's Circular Economy. So over to Greg.
That's great. Greg, you're muted there.
Oh, apology, everyone. That's rookie mistake. There you go. Thank you, Mary, for the lovely introduction, and thank you for coordinating the contribution to the book. I'm grateful to IWRA and UNESCO IWSSM for coordinating this. I'm located in Sydney, Australia, and I just want to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I'm on, the Gadigal people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. The group here at UNSW are asked to speak on water recycling in the circular economy in the Australian context, and we put together a series of case studies that relate to how it's evolved here in Australia. And from that today, I'm going to extract some policy signals and incentives to encourage the deployment of water and energy recovery technology in industrial applications. And I hope that some of the things that we've observed here in Australia resonate to people in other parts of the world. So our question is, what policy settings and initiatives should be used to promote industrial water recycling? And if we begin with one of the more up-to-date definitions of the circular economy by Laurent and his co-workers, that if one of the key objectives is to decouple economic growth from the availability of finite resources, then if we're seeing the role that water recycling plays in that, the issues are neither technical or unit cost driven. We acknowledge that if we looked at the three particular industries, the white meat or the poultry industry, beer brewing, and paper production, a trend in all of them is just an expansion of local consumption. If you look from 1963 to 2015, the amount of white meat consumed per person increased from around about 4.4 kilograms per annum up to 44.8. So an order of magnitude increase, and that's reflective of the developing economies. The reality around the development of water recycling to support that and decouple that growth from finite resources really needs to be looked at in the context of where these facilities are located. So moving against the trend towards rapid urbanization and looking to develop the regions is really important, just as important as the technology or the cost considerations. Similarly, you need to look at what these economies or these industries support both directly and indirectly in terms of employment. The other reason that internal water recycling is important is that other alternative water supplies have limited utility in a lot of these applications. And we'll see in a moment why that is, but essentially they're located away from either coastal regions or major urban centres where water recycling or desalination are viable. The backdrop to a lot of this is the impact of climate change, particularly in countries like Australia, where we're seeing more frequent and deeper drought events, punctuated by more intensive rainfall and flood events. So we have very much a variable climate when it comes to water supply. And moving forward, the effects to mitigate that are all going to be focused on the reduction of both expended and embodied carbon dioxide emissions. The other thing that's very important as a policy trigger is flexibility, particularly to avoid policy conflicts. And there are some good examples that we extracted in the report. So if we look at those three particular industries and where they're located in Australia, A lot of them are located away from the major urban centres, which are highlighted there, which are largely coastal. The market size of the brewing, the pulp and paper and the poultry industry as a percentage of GDP is fairly low in Australia. We are a minerals and agricultural based society. We're not manufacturing is a smaller component. But in these regional centres, these are key employers, not only in the production, but also in the downstream supply chain. So maintaining the viability of these industries is very important for maintaining employment. In terms of water use, however, if you look at the East Coast Murray-Darling Basin system, which has a sustainable yield of on the order of 2,000 gigalitres per annum, these industries, again, are not as water intensive, with the exception of the pulp and paper. Specific demand for beer is typically on the order of 4 to 5 litres per litre of beer, or 5.6 gigalitres per annum. Depending on the grade of paper, from the fairly low grade carton board or packaging all the way through to the high grade fine paper for laser printers, you have a range of about 6 to 40 cubic metres per tonne of paper. And in the processing of poultry, the average is around about 22 litres per bird. But these industries, particularly on the East Coast, are located in areas where the decadal decline in annual precipitation is increasing. So if you look at the East Coast, we see anywhere between 20 to 40 millimetres decrease per decade due to a warming climate. So these industries that are vital for employment, they're vital for the development of the regional areas to reverse the trend of migration to the coast and urbanisation. They're very exposed to climate change. So in that context, a range of technical options are emerging. The most common ones in both the pulp and paper, the poultry and the brewing is what you would refer to as end of pipe. A lot of the processes rely on membrane filtration to produce a high grade of water that is equivalent to the potable supply. So they can offset the potable supply. On waste streams that are very high in BOD and COD content, there, particularly the brewing industry, it's possible to couple that with anaerobic digestion and biogas production to do both combined water and energy recycling through the end of pipe. And there are also some poultry processes that use that approach as well. The other approach is to go inside the process and do internal point of use treatment and reuse. And that's very important in parts of the industry where there are high thermal differences. In the poultry industry, the scalder tanks typically operate between 60 and 70 degrees centigrade in the upstream processing. The spin chillers operate between 2 and 4 degrees centigrade in the downstream processing of the birds. And there's significant energy and water recovery options that are possible in those applications. So when we begin to look at the relative cost per cubic metre, you see that the recycled water, either externally or internally, is around about 1.5 to 2 times higher than the unit cost of purchasing water from a bulk water supplier. So there has to be other ways to justify these projects. And they're usually done through a range of factors. The most basic one is just looking at the overall energy balance. And if we compare which is the Sankey diagrams in the top right-hand corner there, you can see that if you go through all the process of collecting the waste externally to the plant, treating it, and then recycling it back in, the power expended in that is 2.5 times higher than if you simply recover the energy through ceramic filters and heat exchangers to reuse in the scalding process. Similarly, when you begin to take into account impact on income, employment, greenhouse gas emissions, land development, using multi-criteria assessment, increasing the amount of water that you recover drives a whole range of metrics that justify the investment in the process. And these are detailed in the report. Finally, when you move to whole of life cycle assessment, using the standard ISO 14000 model and reduce all of the various inputs to kilograms of carbon dioxide equivalent, internal recycling, decreasing energy consumption and decreasing water input reduces greenhouse gases by around about 50% compared to external processes. So moving into a warmer and drier future where we have policies to mitigate greenhouse gases, internal recycling is going to play a bigger role. It is important, however, to avoid policy conflicts, and that's where the drive towards increasing recycled water conflicts with other policy settings. Australia, like a lot of countries, is a federated governance structure where you have state-based legislation that covers food safety, which often differs with, which often differs from state to state, which makes standardisation difficult, particularly for large brewing and food producers that operate at either a national or a multinational level. At the national level, however, we have some policies that, because we're an export-focused country, actually prevent the use of or prohibit the use of recycled water. This is particularly in the red meat industry, which is more water intense than the poultry, and that's to protect the image of Australia as a high-quality country, particularly in the area of things like bovine serum encephalitis or mad cow disease. So to totally mitigate the risk of that, any form of recycling, either in the upstream or in the processing, is prohibited. Ones that we discovered that were less obvious were mandated targets on the use of other recycled material and how that conflicts with water reuse efficiency. And the most noted one there was the mandated minimum content of recycled fibre in packaging and newsprint. Recycling paper is a very good thing. It eliminates waste from landfill, but there is a bit of a conflict there in finding the optimum amount, because the salts and silica associated with the recycled fibre significantly decreases the efficiency of the water recycling process. So much so that increasing the recycled fibre content from 0 to 40% can give you a 60% increase in the CO2 per cubic metre on water recovered, which offsets the benefit of doing it in the first place. So overall, increasing water recycling provides greater control to water to a range of industries, the brewing, pulp and paper and poultry. It gives them control over their water costs or water security and wastewater disposal, and it eliminates dependencies on the external providers. The unit cost at the moment is higher than the unit cost of external supply, typically by about a factor of 1.5 to 2. However, when you expand the scope and take into account other externalities, recycling is always better than not. Optimizing the inputs can create some conflicts, and the pulp and paper example is one of that, where the recycled fibre content in the feed actually makes it harder to recycle the water. And the lack of national guidelines for water quality and compliance, particularly for food applications, does make the playing field a little bit uneven and difficult to implement. And then finally, there will always be some barriers that trump recycling, particularly in the red meat and that's to protect the export markets. So with that, I'll conclude and be happy to take questions now or later.
Okay, thank you. We don't have any questions on the board right now, but I'd like to encourage all of the participants to provide your questions as the presentation is being made. I do have one, actually, maybe Greg, you could comment on the fact that the recycled water is more than 2 times higher, you know, the internal water versus purchasing water, and whether that's also a reflection of artificially low pricing on purchased water, or purchased water that doesn't reflect the true value in some way that would, you know, help to balance that pricing a bit better.
That's a very good point. The tariff that we see on water rates, you know, are calculated based on the cost to deliver the water to maintain the assets and operate them. Asset maintenance is spread across a whole range of infrastructure in bulk water supply. However, when you compare it to the internal or the external recycled water supply, you've got a real concentrated base of assets that you're trying to retire typically in 25 years. So there is if you were to look at the operating costs, you get closer to parity, but the big bulk water suppliers can take advantage of the economies of scale, and that their asset maintenance is spread over a much longer period than the internal or the industrial recyclers.
Right, and I don't know about Australia, but certainly in Canada, we also have an infrastructure deficit, for example, in water infrastructure, where the price of water is actually not even covering fully the asset maintenance over the, you know, replacement and maintenance. So there's that that pricing differential becomes even more dramatic. Yeah. Okay, great. Okay, we have just a question on whether we have links to research the prices and reasoning for prices as presented. So we can't provide that right now, but I think you'll see some more information in the report once it's published. Okay, so our next presenter is Dr. Chaya Ravishankar. She is the assistant manager with Xylem Water Solutions in India, where she develops base of pyramid solutions in water sanitation. In her career, she supported numerous projects on advanced treatment technologies and remedial solutions for contaminated sites. Her PhD research focused on social acceptance of reclaimed water. She's the lead author of the chapter titled Market for Reclaimed Water Through Private Water Tankers, Sustainable Service Provision in the Peri-Urban Area. So welcome, Chaya.
Thank you, Mary, for that introduction. Let me share my screen. Okay, once again, a very good afternoon and good morning to everyone present here. I thank IWSSM, UNESCO, and IWRA for having given me this opportunity to present my research, which is on how private water tankers can serve as a sustainable service provision for reclaimed water. As we all know, many water utilities across the globe have been following the linear approach, which is the supply side approach to manage water. And what we see is a lot of challenges when it goes from source to user and then discharged, like unaccounted water loss and inequity in supply, and how water use behavior, people consider it as a free good and it's unlimited. And when it's discharged, not all the sewage enters the sewage treatment plants, and hence they're polluting the water bodies and the ecosystem. So with this, the focus of the presentation or the research was for the Bangalore city, where again, it followed the similar supply side approach, where if we see way back in 1974, when the first water treatment plant was established, the only river source for Bangalore city has been Kaveri River, which has been supplied, and it has been continuously augmented to cater to the expanding city population. And as of now, the city receives a supply of 1,310 million liters per day from Kaveri. And has this catered to the demand? No. And we have also seen that as of 2015, the continuous groundwater abstraction, and these numbers on the right side of the map present the number of borewells that have been dug by the independent houses, commercial establishments, and also some of the borewells given by the municipal authority. We see that the numbers range from 8,000 and odd in the north of Bengaluru to around 16,700 and odd in south of Bengaluru, supplying around 569 million liters per day. So around 40% of the city's population is dependent on groundwater. But we also probably take the credit of having the highest number of sewage treatment plants in India, with 14 installed and 18 more are under construction. Yet only 10% of the wastewater generated in city is being treated. With a lot of multi-storied apartments and large commercial complexes and IT parks being set up, since 2005, the Pollution Control Board made it a mandate to have decentralized sewage treatment plants and package STPs for these individual commercial and residential apartments. Since then, we have seen around 141 million liters per day of wastewater being treated by these private sewage treatment plants, and have been used for toilet flushing or gardening, urban farming, and some of them for their air coolers in commercial establishments as well. So, since there is a well-established infrastructure, now the research thought process was to have it as a one water, where we consider the blue circular economy approach, and can this water supply, that is the surface water, be used only for the potable purpose, and use the treated water and reclaimed water for groundwater recharge? And are people willing to use this reclaimed water? And how to ensure that the treated water is used as a resource would be the questions that would help us in developing the blue circular economy model. To aid into this research in alignment, Bengaluru's Water Authority came up with the first policy initiative in 2015, where this advertisement was published in the newspaper then, where 3 tertiary treatment plants of Bengaluru were ready to supply their reclaimed water. And from the survey, we found that around 36.51 MLD were already being supplied from the period of November 2015 to May 2016. I got a notification, sorry, to show my screen again. Is my screen visible?
There you go. Looks great.
That
looks great. Continue.
Am I audible?
Yes. You were doing great. Please continue.
Okay, I'll just continue. Yeah, so from this city scale, the study area focused on the peri-urban region or the suburban region, which comprises of 10 villages out of the 110 villages that were agglomerated into the Bangalore metropolitan area. And these suburban areas have actually developed into a proper mid-sized middle-income neighborhood. But the pace at which the industrial and commercial establishments like special economic zones and IT parks were created also developed a significant residential neighborhood. But water infrastructure has been almost poor to nil. So the first and foremost approach used in this peri-urban area was to collect the primary data of water demand, as they did not have a formal piped water supply scheme or a metering to account how much of water has been used. And we noticed across the various land use typologies like hospitals, IT parks, shops, small hotels, restaurants, and residential apartments that there is a significant variation in the per capita demand of water. And when we estimated back then in 2015, that we found that the total demand exerted just by these 10 villages was 11.6 million liters per day. And when we projected for the total population in 2049, we found that water demand would be around 16 MLD and wastewater generated would be 13 MLD, with 6 MLD, that's almost 50% of the demand, being for the non-potable purposes. Now, amidst all the non-potable purposes that we usually see in the literature, like toilet flushing, gardening, and landscape irrigation, or the cooling tower usage, there is a significant cultural use attached with the southern part of India, where street washing and dust suppression is practiced very regularly. As you see in this photograph captured, a lady is using a hose pipe, and it's not for dust suppression, it is to clean the front yard of the house, more from a cultural and a religious background to keep the premises clean. And this kind of usage doesn't really account the true value of water. So with this assessment, we also found that when we moved to the analysis of tanker water supply, we found a very interesting scenario where the BWSSB, that's the Water Sewerage Board of Bangalore, is also supplying water through tankers during summer seasons when it cannot meet through the surface water body. And also there is this private water tankers. You might have seen in the literature in many countries and in many cities across India, it's more predominant and prevalent as an informal market where people are ready to pay exorbitant prices and to cater to their needs. So in the study size of 350 dwellings, we saw that 423 tankers were catering, and the per day supply volume of water was around 25 lakh liters, where 36% of tankers do not do a quality check of this, and we do not know where from the water is sourced. Or however, what we came up with this analysis was there is a fixed route or radius of operation where these tankers commute and supply, and there is a known demand and a known consumer target, with which we proposed that the same tankers can be supplying reclaimed water from this tertiary treatment, which is proposed by the BWSSB. So with the questionnaires that were interviewed with the tanker vendors, the willingness to buy reclaimed water was predominant variously across various factors, basically where revenue generation was promising. They found that sourcing water from BWSSB at ₹15 per kiloliter was relatively economical for them, and they could have a really higher margin. And hence 33% of tanker operators were ready to buy. And consumer acceptance also played a predominant factor, because they knew that treated water may not be accepted easily by the consumers. Pro-environment. Many tanker vendors have lost their business due to scarcity of water from the bore wells going dry. So they said, yes, in order to have a secure water source, this would be a probable option. And also quality assurance. Some of the tanker vendors do check the quality, and they submit the test reports to their consumers, and hence they requested for the quality assurance to be provided, and then they would be willing to buy and sell the reclaimed water to their consumers. However, not willing to buy reclaimed water also had a very genuine reasons, like lack of storage provision, because the current provision of having a storage sump or an overhead tank wouldn't allow the consumers and residents to store the reclaimed water separately, existing, and they would have to undergo new civil works. Quality, of course, is a predominant concern, as when they are procuring fresh water, consumers are already questioning about the quality. Now, when they claim or when they propagate that this is reclaimed water, consumers would definitely be questioning the quality. Investment and maintenance, as these tanker vendors would have to invest in a new tanker, because the freshwater tanker cannot be used for this reclaimed water supply. So 25% of them were not willing to buy and sell. And lack of demand for reclaimed water, because even though the newspaper had already had the advertisement and a lot of publishing had been done, people were not really aware of this provision, and the demand is not clearly shown or expected and seen by these tanker vendors. So the very welcome move is in 2019, an excellent initiative again taken by BWSSB is they have scaled up and extended the selling water, reclaimed water through tankers specifically to the residential communities in the core central business district of Bengaluru. And this notification has been released. But what we see from our research findings from 2017 are that a mode of supply, because these peri-urban areas are using only bore wells or their own groundwater source, they do not feel the need of paying a monetary amount, as water is a free good for them. Hence, acceptance is challenging. However, the communities who are already dependent on tanker supply for their current use of fresh water were early adopters. There were around 23% of tenants, respondents who were willing to buy reclaimed water because it was available at an affordable pricing. And when they were made aware of that quality assurance being given by the water authority, they were also eager to accept it. So these responses from tanker vendors reveal their interest in business, so to supply reclaimed water more as a revenue generation. However, the way forward would be to have a thorough evaluation of risk assessment and the system's reliability testing, and a considerable public health impacts that can happen, because this research did not cover the water quality monitoring of the tertiary treated plants, and hence further research to be extended to more suburban areas like this, and piloting in these areas seems to be a very promising experiment where we can have tankers as sustainable service provision for reclaimed water. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Chaya. We have a couple of questions that are related to the water quality of the water from the tankers. So maybe you could just comment on the quality assurance. So you did mention that there is a quality assurance from the water authority. Maybe you could just comment on how that's implemented.
Mary, I'm not able to hear you. Am I audible?
You are, am I not? I'm not on mute. You can't, can you hear me?
I can hear you both. I can hear you both.
Can you hear me, Chaya? Can you hear me, Chaya?
Yes, I can hear you now. Sorry, was I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a delay and I hear an echo. There's a delay and I hear an echo.
We also hear a bit of an echo. Yes. We also hear a bit of an echo. Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, not sure.
Mary, go ahead and just pose the question, and then we'll see if we can address this question and the next person who's presenting.
Okay, so the questions, there's a couple of questions about water quality, and maybe you could just tell us a bit more about how the Water Authority assures the quality of the tanker, and what would motivate a consumer to trust water from a tanker if they have another source or a different option.
Yes, so thanks for the question. Like I said, the scope of our research did not involve monitoring of water quality personally. However, now if we go to the Bangalore Water Supply Sewerage Board portal, all their treatment plants have a remote water quality monitoring. And every day their hourly data, water quality data from all their sewage treatment plants are displayed in the public domain. So people can access it and get to know the quality of water. And because there are only 3 or 4 tertiary treatment plants which will be catering to this tanker water supply, we can also go to the authorities to submit the certificate. And there is this 2019 initiative. I'm not sure how they have come up with it, because our publication was already in progress. And what I see is, what I would recommend is that with these tankers, I'm sure the authority would come up with some formal license and some quality test certificates to be produced by these tanker vendors to be submitted to the end users.
Okay, thank you. There is a question about sharing the presentations, and they will be available on IWRA's website. Okay, so we'll move on to our next presenter, and we will have time afterwards for some panel discussions and additional questions. So our next presenter, we've had a couple of technical issues, so we can't see her, but we will have some slides, I think, that she has shared with Scott. So Dr. Oriana Romano is with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD. She's head of the unit Water Governance and Circular Economy in Cities. She's worked on a range of initiatives to support cities and regions in developing, implementing, and assessing circular economy strategies. She holds a PhD in Institution Economics and Law of Public Services. Dr. Romano is the lead author of a chapter titled Water and the Circular Economy in Cities, Observations and Ways Forward. So welcome, Oriana.
Hi, Mary. Thank you very much, and apologies for the technical issues. I hope you can hear me well and see the PowerPoint. I can see the PowerPoint, so this is a very good news. If you can hear me well, I can proceed.
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. So I have 3 slides just to share some 3 key messages that came out from the paper that you just mentioned, and also a report that we actually finalized just these days, and that will be out and publicly available on the 28th of October. This report is a report on the circular economy in cities and regions, in which, of course, the water sector is also analyzed. So if we go to the first slide, the first message is that the water sector has been applying circular principles for very long. So managing water in a circular way implies reducing water use in production cycles, as Greg just shown, ensuring more sustainable water flows, reducing water for specific purposes, of course, taking into account health and environmental standards, as well as generating energy and recovering a wide variety of material from wastewater treatment. So for water specialists, these objectives of water within a circular economy approach did not really sound anything new. We have an example that is very well known all over the world, is the example of Singapore. Since 2003, the Public Utilities Board introduced a new water. So this high-grade reclaimed water produced from treated used water. And although it is primarily used for non-potable industrial purposes, there was a lot of communication campaign and awareness raising about reusing water. And this is already quite a long ago. More recently, we collected some examples from Spain. For example, the city of Granada transformed wastewater treatment in what is called a biofactory, that reached in 2019 100% of energy self-sufficiency goal, and also is reusing water sludge for compost, and also application in the agricultural sectors. And there are many examples of display of these like these ones I just mentioned. If we look at this graph, you can see that water comes very high in the ranking of the sectors included in circular economy strategies in several cities and regions. This is the result of a survey we carried out across 51 cities and regions in the OECD countries, and many of these cities, 66% of circular economy initiative that we were able to analyzed, identified water and sanitation sector as key for the circular economy. There are many examples, like for example, Barcelona, in the Barcelona metropolitan area in Spain, there are some priorities in the creation of a water cluster, and there are also funds for research and development in the sectors, and it is applied an intersectorial approach in relation to the interplay of the water sector in with food and also with design. In Flanders, in Belgium, there are several demonstration projects in relation to water reusing and recycling, and the partnership of Circular Flanders created also different spaces for stakeholder collaboration with a very strong technical approach on water innovation. The second message, and we can go to the second slide, actually the third, please, is that governance is key. It was already also highlighted by previous speakers. The technical solutions exist, and that's why my previous message was that the water sector is actually absolutely not new to the circular economy approach. But what is still missing are several governance dimension to make sure that this technical solution can be put in place effectively, efficiently, and for long-lasting period of time. In particular, from the survey that we carried out that I mentioned earlier on, you would see that the very least of the obstacles are technical solutions, and the greater obstacles are in relation to insufficient funding, regulation, but also cultural barriers and stakeholder engagement. And this is very true also for the water sector. Updated regulation of water infrastructure system, for example, is very important to scale up technical solutions when we talk about wastewater treatment and membrane filters for extracting medicinal residues, and this is what is happening during the COVID, for example. And also updated regulation is needed to create a market for secondary product, and perhaps also to have an influence on the ultimate cost comparing water recycling and water supply. And this is something that the European level, as a part of the action plan of the circular economy by the European Commission, is working on, specifying a legislation on quality standards for the reuse of reclaimed water, and so on. Then there is another point, for example, in terms of stakeholder engagement and new business models, which are very much needed, but they have to be conceived like hand in hand with governance conditions that should be unlocked, and also this are posing challenges also for public authorities, utilities, and stakeholders, because the circular economy is very much a shared responsibility. So, for example, when in Amsterdam the municipality tried to transform an industrial site in a circular economy site, which was a residential one, there were some issues, in particular with the water operator, WaterNet, in terms of use of public resources and also in terms of investing in decentralized water system. So the novelty of this approach, of the circular economy approach, also poses questions on how the resources in terms of finance should be best allocated. What is the role of the water operator, not just as a supplier of water into the network, but also like innovators, how it can contribute to conceiving, for example, residential plans, that in this case in Amsterdam, that would combine water, energy, use of materials, stakeholder engagement, and so on. So governance is key. And finally, my third message, and we can go to the next slide, please. And also click again so we can have also the icons. Perfect. Thank you very much. It's just that, okay, so we know that water is not new to the circular economy. Governance is key. So what to do now? In the paper and also in the report on the circular economy, we focus the attention on the three basic elements that can help improving the overall governance and economic system for the circular economy applied to the water sector, and it is based on what we call the 3 Ps framework. The first one is about people. So the circular economy is a shared responsibility across levels of governments and stakeholders. Water operators can determine the shift towards a new business model, like, for example, fostering water reuse or decentralized water solutions. At the same time, citizens can make choices regarding water consumption and waste prevention, and also agriculture, and also in the agricultural sector, and farmers can play an important role in reusing and recycling water, as well as industry. So people and firms, they play an important role, and there is a much needed of coordination, upgrading regulation, and also allocation of funds. When it comes to policies, the circular economy requires an holistic approach. So when we talk about water in the circular economy, it's not just about water, it's about water and energy. For example, recovering from sludge sewage treatment. It's about water and agriculture, like sludge treated sludge used as organic fertilizer. It's about water and construction. Wastewater sludge can be used as a construction material, and also within a circular economy approach, new buildings will be used using water much more efficiently than before. So these interactions and complementarities are often overlooked, and the lack of a systemic approach is likely to lead to implementation of fragmented projects in the short and medium terms, whereas it is important to take into account sustainable policies in the long run. And finally, places. Most of these activities I'm talking about food or constructions or water consumption in buildings. They happen at city level, so urban policies. But when we talk about cities, it's not just conceiving them as an isolated ecosystem, but it's mostly a space for inflow and outflows of material and resources and products. So it is very important to take into account the relation with the surrounding areas, with the rural areas, with the region itself, in order to create this interaction. So this is the end of my presentation. I thank you very much for your attention, and in case you have any question, you can contact me, and please have a look at the forthcoming report on the circular economy in cities and regions, where you can find all this information I just shared. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Oriana. That was certainly an information-filled presentation. Lots of areas that we could potentially dive into. And I'm just wondering if of the cities, the very successful and progressive cities that you're familiar with, is there a common characteristic, or something, if there's someone from a city who's interested in starting somewhere, how would you characterize where some of the more successful cities started? Did they start with policy or public education or identifying a leader, or is there a common thread at all?
Well, in the case of the water sector, I think what is interesting within the circular economy approach is that all these objectives that I mentioned, like reducing water use or reusing water or generating energy or finding alternative water supply, were mostly driven by crisis management. Instead, so a response, for example, to scarcity or to a need of using resources, water resources, in a more effective and efficient way. The circular economy requires an holistic approach, so water is being taken into account in several policies, not just because there is a crisis, but just because it is needed to take into account the role of water for economic activities, for social well-being, and also to look into the socioeconomic opportunities in relation, for example, to employment, as well as in innovation and technical development. However, this technical development, and as we highlighted, the existence of very effective technological solutions that have been present in the water sector for so long, they need to be accompanied by communication, awareness raising, educational campaign. So this is where the government, of course, in coordination with stakeholders, can really act and to make sure that water is not just given for granted, also in circular economy approaches, but that actually plays an important role in connection with other sectors and activities within the city.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to find anything that water's not ultimately connected to. So
yeah.
So the questions, this issue of water quality, is really the basis for a lot of the questions. And we'll start with Chaya because they are focused on, quality issues associated with the tankers, for example. The onus on the tankers to do any testing? Is it on the government? How basically, how is the water quality tested? But I think we could also broaden that question, in terms of the other water reuse and circular economy approaches in industry. The water is reused internally. As Greg was describing, but could that water be provided outside of the industry? Is there interlinking there that could be leveraged more? Maybe we'll start with Chaya and quality assurance from the tankers.
Sure. Yeah, Mary, like I said, when we were surveying the tanker vendors, the first question, one of the questions was, are you testing the water, and from where are you sourcing the water? So most of the tankers were withdrawing the water from a local borewell, their own borewell, and they said that they would be testing only for the TDS because it's relatively pathogen free and it's fresh water. They've been using it, so it was a kind of accepted or assumed thing that it did not need any other microbial or chemical quality testing at that point of time. And we saw the certificates that they were providing to the end users. It had only the salts, because here largely we think that the aquifers are basically hard water in nature, and only total dissolved salts would be the impacting the use. And these certificates were provided by the tankers when we were questioning. However, now when I suggest that the tertiary treated water should be used by these tanker vendors, BWSSB, the Bangalore Water Supply Authority, is testing the water frequently, and it's an online monitoring of water quality that is publicly available on the BWSSB website. I think I can just probably even open the website and share the screen later, once we finish all the questions, and if we have some time to show it. There is continuous monitoring of all the relevant parameters of bacteriological and chemical parameters, which need to be adhered to as per the standards and norms. However, this water would be only recommended for the non-potable uses, considering that we haven't gone further with a thorough risk assessment or any microbial or other related health impacts that could be possible, or hence non-potable uses which are already being practiced, like the flushing and dual piping for the cooling towers. What we recommended was it could be used, stored in a separate place, and used for street washing, which is a very predominant and huge quantity of water being used. Hence, wouldn't require a drinking water quality standard, and a tertiary treated water would suffice that end use.
Okay.
Have I good? Yeah.
I think so. So into this question of water quality, I mean, it does keep coming up when we talk about circular economy. And maybe Greg, do you have a comment on broader use? Or, I mean, some of these industries, as you mentioned, they're away from urban centers, so the opportunity to get wastewater effluent and reuse that is quite limited. But is there opportunity for outside industry uses?
Yeah, so we haven't really started to see it yet, but the real practitioners of urban planning and circular economy, when they're beginning to look at how industries are clustered is beginning to get more traction. Again, in the regional areas, and one area in particular in the state that I'm in, New South Wales, what's called the Namoy Valley. There's 6 councils in there that are thinking about their agribusinesses and moving away from primary producers to value added. So you would be looking at more processing of the raw agricultural products. And in that context, the waste from one industry may become the feedstock from another industry, so too the wastewater. So we haven't really seen a lot of that yet, but there is the potential for people to start looking at that. The population density is low, so you're right, on 200 to 250 litres per person per day, you're not going to get the volumes of wastewater that could possibly supply these industries that are quite water intensive. In terms of the quality, at the municipal water recycling, and for municipal drinking water, there's been a move away from endpoint testing to actually procedures that are adopted in the food processing, the hazard analysis and critical control point. So rather than measuring for a particular parameter to ensure that the water is, say, has been disinfected appropriately, you would monitor for a process variable that is a critical control point that ensures that the system is working as intended. And so using that HACCP approach, which came out of the food safety industry, you can look at things like spin chillers, where the whole purpose there is to keep the birds cool, to prevent largely to prevent salmonella infecting the meat, or in the scald tank, where the purpose there is to defeather the bird. So you're not really changing the product, it's purely a process stream that you can recycle the water, filter it, disinfect it, and then reuse it in situ without having to go to the problem of commingling it, where it picks up waste from other parts of the plant that then require additional treatment to get it back to that point where it can be reused. In the beverage industry, you're mostly looking at all the very heavy rinsing of equipment, particularly the fermenters, the cans and things like that. The beer industry has moved away, or they haven't gone to reusing their own waste back in the product. They still use fresh potable water for that. But one of the breweries has got down from an industry average of around about 4.5 litres of water per litre per beer down to around about 1.2. So it's tremendous savings, everything except using it as the raw material. In those applications, the water quality is almost identical to what would come through the potable system, and that's where processes like reverse osmosis and ultraviolet disinfection that are used in the Singapore project that Ariana spoke of have become very important.
Thank you. And Ariana, do you have anything to add? Actually, and I'll just mention that we did host a webinar a couple of months ago, and there was a presentation on the Singapore system, and there is a chapter in the upcoming publication on the Singapore recycling. But maybe I'll just turn it over to Oriana to comment on water quality and successful assurance, if you want, or proper matching quality to use is really the issue.
Yeah, I think just to reiterate the message that the case of Singapore, it was successful because it was because the new water, when it was introduced, it was really exceeding the drinking water standards set by the WHO and also by, for example, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency in the US. There was a clear objectives in terms of purposes. So for example, industrial estate, commercial buildings. People were educated about this new water, and there were a communication campaign that reached also the population that actually didn't use directly the recycled water. So what I think is very important is always to combine, as this case proved to be successful, this very technical knowledge and infrastructure that Greg described, and there is a wide variety of those with instruments and tools that can allow the understanding, and then they can raise awareness on the why and the how water can actually be recycled within, of course, quality standards. In the European level, the specific legislation that is prepared on water quality standard, for example, for the reuse of reclaimed water, also required a huge amount of investment, and this is something that also it has to be taken into account when it comes to these types of infrastructure. At the level of the European Commission, there is a total of 15 billion that have been euros that have been devoted to investment in water reuse in the period of 2014-2020. So another issue to consider.
Yeah. I don't know. So do you want to add to the discussion? No. Okay. Okay. So we would like to continue to encourage people to submit questions. So the theme of the webinar is policy to support water reuse in a circular economy. And if there was some kind of genie that could grant a wish for your top policy support, or whether it's a regulation or a pricing point, or what would you, each of the panelists, if you could comment on really what's the first barrier or the key priority for policy to support water reuse in a circular economy? Maybe we can start with Greg.
So, for the companies that want to do it, initially it's the capital cost of installing either the internal systems or building a plant that intercepts their waste, and they then externally recycle it and supplement their water supply. However, it's usually either the availability of water or the ability to dispose of the wastewater that prevents the expansion. So policy signals that allow them to grow the business, to encourage the business to grow, rather than focusing on the water and wastewater infrastructure, will provide them with surety that so for example, the poultry industry would be one, that at that particular site, they can accommodate and they can plan for doubling the capacity of birds that they process, or the volume of beer that they produce, or paper that goes out. If they have the business certainty around that, then the decision to install the recycling components is usually a requirement to allow them to expand, but also they can see how they will recover the costs, and that the return on investment of the additional capital will be worth it. So it's all about making a climate where they can guarantee that the expansion will occur.
All right, market signals. Yeah,
yeah.
or economics. Yeah. Chai, if you had a policy
Yes,
wish.
So if you see the example of Bangalore as I presented, I would second Greg on the giving the need, because now here on one hand the municipal authorities give permission to install bore wells and dig bore wells for free water, fresh water, and on the other hand the sewerage board is promoting, please use coming up with policy to use tertiary treated water. So there is no institutional coordination between the municipal authority giving permission for bore wells is different, and the institution providing tertiary water the two institutions are not coordinating with each other. So this is kind of a disadvantage, and the end users would not get any motive. So that, I think, lack of institutional coordination should be first, and I'm sure this happens in most of the municipal, administrative governments when they interact with each other at various levels. That's one thing. And second would be, once there is a ban on freshwater abstraction ground, automatically people will realize, okay, because it's just used for non-potable purposes. So then the need and the demand only for drinking water would be established. That policy, I think, would help encourage sale of tertiary treated water without compromising on quality. Again, we can draw example from Singapore that if a policy of planned indirect potable reuse is something that every other city which has a good surface water in its proximity can actually route its treated water to its potable surface water source. And I think that ensures dilution and required water quality standards would help a city to cater to the supply of water. Yeah. Thank you.
And Oriana?
Yes, thank you. I echo the previous speakers on the need of coordination across institutional authorities and levels of government. And I would add that it's important also to perform a clear risk assessment procedure, and also to enhance the cooperation between industrial and municipal wastewater treatment plants and, for example, food producers, in order to create a positive environment for industrial symbiosis, which is one of the tools, let's say, to enhance the circular economy in cities and regions.
Right. Physical proximity of the systems is one of the issues, without getting into pumping costs and energy, and yeah, there's some baseline municipal planning perhaps that would help support the interchange of resources, not only water but energy, nutrients, those kinds of things. Okay, so we don't have any questions. We're getting near the end of our time. So maybe I can just turn it back over to Scott.
Yes, well, as you say, it was a quick hour and a half, I think. Probably went faster for than many of us expected. But we had some great presentations, and I think that I really enjoyed the engagement we saw here today. A lot of good back and forth and discussion. I thought that was really good. Well, thank you everybody in the audience for tuning in today. I'd again like to thank our panel. So a big thank you to the moderator, Mary Trudeau, Project Officer at the IWRA, and our panel today of Sue Choi, Program Specialist at UNESCO IWSSM in Korea, Greg Leslie, Director of the UNSW Global Water Institute in Australia, and Chaya Rekavar, Assistant Manager, Hilam Water Sources Solutions in India, and Orino Romano, a policy analyst at OECD in France here. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We really appreciate that. I know that some of the panel, and I know that IWRA are on Twitter. So if you're interested, go ahead and look them up and follow them, see if you're interested. And if these presentations have left you interested in learning more, please feel free to go to our LinkedIn webpage and continue the discussion and to follow us there. So I hope that everyone in the audience found the insights provided by our panel during the special event to be really useful. To remind you, we have an upcoming webinar on the similar, another part of this publication, Mary, that is on the December 16th, yes? Yes, December 16th. So mark your calendar. You can go to www.iwra.org to register. And of course, we'll be sending it out through all of our regular channels as well. So you'll be sure to catch it in time. We're looking forward to having you there. We're looking forward to really continuing the discussion, because I think this is an important issue and something that we can really kind of return to each few months. As Mary said, we had a webinar on the same issue a few months ago, and I think it's helpful to kind of see this progression as we go along. So to remind everyone in the audience again, the webinar was brought to you by the International Water Resources Association. We are an almost 50-year-old nonprofit, non-governmental educational organization, and we focus on bridging disciplines and geographies and connecting professionals, students, individuals, corporations, and institutions, everyone who's concerned with the sustainable use of the world's water resources. So if you're interested in learning more about the association or becoming a member or watching the recordings of this event or finding the PDFs of the presenters' presentations, please go to www.iwra.org and you'll find everything there. So on behalf of the whole IWRA office and on behalf of my whole panel, I'd really like to thank everyone for watching the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.